All right, let's start the big story that just broke. Just came across the wire here about 2 minutes ago. And the State Department is pausing immigrant visa processing for 75 countries in an effort to crack down on applicants deemed likely to become a public charge, or somebody that would come from a country and they're looking to be put on welfare. That shouldn't be the reason that you come to the United States. You shouldn't come here expecting the people of this country to take care of you. A State Department memo, seen first by Fox News, directs consular offices to refuse visas under existing law while the department reassesses screening and vetting procedures. The countries include Somalia, Russia, Afghanistan, Brazil, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Nigeria, Thailand, Yemen, and more. The pause will begin next Wednesday, the 21st, and will continue indefinitely until the department conducts a reassessment of visa processing. Somalia has drawn heightened scrutiny from federal officials following a sweeping fraud scandal centered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where prosecutors uncovered massive abuse of taxpayer-funded benefit programs. Many of those involved are Somali nationals or Somali Americans. In November of 2025, a State Department cable sent to posts around the globe instructed consular offices to enforce sweeping new screening rules under the so-called public charge provision of immigration law. The guidance instructs consular officers to deny visas to applicants deemed likely to rely on public benefits, weighing a wide range of factors including health, age, English proficiency, finances, and even potential need for long-term medical care. Older or overweight applicants could be denied, along with those who had any past use of government cash assistance or institutionalization. The State Department will use its long-standing authority to deem ineligible potential immigrants who would become a public charge on the United States and exploit the generosity of the American people. That, according to the State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott in a statement just released a while ago. Immigration from these 75 countries will be paused while the State Department reassesses immigration processing procedures to prevent the entry of foreign nationals who would take welfare and public benefits. While the public charge provision has existed for decades, enforcement has varied widely across administrations, with consular officers historically given broad discretion in applying the standard. Exceptions to the new pause will be very limited and only allowed after the applicant has cleared public charge considerations. A 2022 version of the public charge rule under the Biden administration had limited the scope of benefits considered primarily to cash assistance and long-term institutional care, excluding programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Federal Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children known as WIC, Medicaid, or housing vouchers. The Immigration and Nationality Act has long permitted consular officers to deem applicants inadmissible on public charge grounds, but President Trump in 2019 expanded the definition to include a broader range of public benefits. That expansion was challenged in court, with portions ultimately blocked before being rescinded by the Biden administration. So there you have it. That's a brand new decision by the State Department and the Trump administration. So I'm taking a look here. Here's what people are saying in reference to this. One reference says, "I voted for this." Another said, "Immigration is not a right. If you cannot speak the language, will become a burden on social services and refuse to assimilate and embrace American culture, then you are not an ideal candidate. It's not rocket science." I don't think China made the list, but there's an old saying, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Good. This completely open border nonsense has got to come to an end. And no federal judges should attempt to stick his face into this. The U.S. State Department and executive have sole authority in such matters. Anyone, including states and Congress, having a problem with this can go right to the U.S. Supreme Court for clarification. Deal with it. Read the Constitution. Understand the Constitution. Abide by the Constitution. And then two last ones. Huh? So no more better economic opportunities? Question mark? That's right. Especially if you're coming over here and you can't feed yourself or buy the food to feed yourself. And then last, God bless Trump. It's about time. And I would have to agree with that. It is about time that we deal with this stuff the way it should be. The FBI is searching a reporter's home. And the reason the FBI executed a search warrant on Washington Post reporter Hannah Nathanson's home on Wednesday as part of a probe into a government contractor accused of illegally retaining classified government materials, the paper announced. Nathanson was at her Virginia home at the time of the search, and a warrant stated law enforcement was investigating Aurelio Perez Laganas, a system administration in Maryland, who has a top-secret security and has been accused of accessing and taking home classified intelligence reports that were found in his lunchbox and his basement, the Post reported. Nathanson covers the Trump administration reshaping of the government and its effects, according to her ex-bio. Her home and devices were searched, and Nathanson told her employer that a phone and Garmin watch were seized. Also, Perez Lagonas is an American citizen who was born in Miami and now resides in Laurel, Maryland, according to a criminal complaint. He has been a government contractor since 2002, possesses top-secret security clearance. Perez Laganas' current role is administrative. According to the complaint, he works as a systems engineer and information technology specialist for a government contracting company whose primary customer is a government agency. So I'm hoping that they got some information. They're checking this out. And if you have a top secret clearance, this could happen to you at any time because they want to make sure that state secrets aren't being released. So they got the search warrant and all the necessary paperwork done and went in and did the search. I just hope that this is not a case where there's this guy getting information out that he snuck out of his work area in his lunch pail, evidently, and it was a newspaper person who was being used as the carrier. I hope that is not the essence of this story. So we'll just have to wait until we find out about it. All right. The big story right now is Iran and what's going on out there, and I'll give you that information in a second. But in relation to that story, Iran reportedly is expected to execute first anti-government protester this afternoon. Some U.S. military personnel have been said to leave bases in the Middle East. The order comes amid widespread protests in Iran and threats to intervene from President Trump. Qatar's government confirmed that some U.S. personnel had departed from the air base there, America's largest military base in the Middle East. Qatar's international media office said that steps were part of broader efforts to safeguard the security of citizens and residents and to protect critical infrastructure and military facilities, adding that any further developments would be announced through official channels. The president said on Tuesday that they cut off meetings with the Iranian regime, saying there would be no contact until the government stops killing protesters. He also urged the Iranian people to take over the country. Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stop. Help is on its way. Trump has repeatedly suggested that the U.S. may intervene against the Ayatollah al-Khamenei's regime, but he has not offered details of any plans at this time. All right, so bad things happening over in Iran. Netanyahu and Rubio have been discussing U.S. military intervention in Iran amid ongoing nationwide protests. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussed the possibility of U.S. intervention in Iran. According to a report, the two leaders spoke by phone Saturday as Israel is on high alert, preparing for the possibility of U.S. military intervention in Iran. That's according to Reuters, citing multiple Israeli sources. A U.S. official confirmed the call to Fox, but did not provide any additional details. The report comes as nationwide anti-regime demonstrations across Iran hit the 2-week mark. Saturday, the Iranian regime triggered an internet kill switch in an apparent effort to conceal alleged abuses by security forces, and as protests against it surged nationwide, according to a cybersecurity expert. The blackout reduced internet access to a fraction of normal levels. So things just keep ratcheting up over there. They're dealing with it, and we're going to just keep our eye on this. Just know that it's the latest flashpoint in a tinderbox in the Middle East, and something's going to happen. Do I think that the Shah is going to be disposed? I think they're very close to people of that country winning him, leaving the country, taking enough money with him that he can live over in Russia and doesn't have to stick around the Iraqi cities or in the borders of Iraq. All right, that's our first look of the big stories. There's more that we're going to talk about in a moment. I want to remind you about PI Roofing. PI Roofing wants you to know that residential roofing and maintenance is their number one issue that they take care of. If you got a complicated roof, the better, because if you got a shingle roof with a flat roof, they can help maintain it and fix the leaks. You might have some really expensive shingles, those Spanish-looking ones that are made specifically, individually, and they can help you with that. And that if you just want a better roof than your neighbor, they can help you with that as well. All you have to do is go to piroofing.com. piroofing.com. Ask them your questions. They'll send you answers. They'll send you they'll set up to come out and visit your house, and then send you a internet piece of paper with all the costs on it and what it's going to run you. So if you want to do a roof, as far as things dealing with residential roofs, they can handle that. They can handle commercial as well. All you have to do is go to piroofing.com. That's piroofing.com. To go out and shop at high-end department stores, the owner of Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman, has filed for bankruptcy, crumbling under billions of dollars in debt. And I'm just looking at some of the things people are writing underneath of it and saying, serious question, where are all the rich women going to shop at instead? Maybe Macy's, I don't know. Although rich women, Macy's is not good enough. Barney's, Brooks, not what it used to be now. This, where are we supposed to shop? From a woman. Here's another talking. They're simply been way overpriced for their entire existence. Listen to this part of it. The average person isn't going to pay $1,600 for a pair of pants or $800 for a turtleneck, even if they can. I don't care what the fabric is made of. Consumer culture has changed dramatically in America. I don't know if I agree with that. I've got friends, and they go out to Neiman Marcus, and they spend $2,000 on a frickin' purse. Now, I've never, or my wife has never, spent over probably $50 on a purse, much less, $2,000. But I've had people who have said they'd gone to vacation out at in Vegas and went shopping for purses at Neiman Marcus there, and walked out buying a very high-priced purse, and then got home and rued the day that they spent that kind of money, but they couldn't take the purse back, and they ended up keeping it, and they're even embarrassed to show it, that they have one, to their friends, because their friends look at them and say, "What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? You spent $2,000 on that?" So anyway, there's a couple of stories that I haven't had this morning, and they just showed up, and so now I can talk to you about that. All right, we got to get our break in. We got to do that here on the Dave Elswick Show. That's coming up because we got news coming your way, and we've got about 25 seconds here before we get there. We come back, we'll talk about the Supreme Court and the arguments yesterday dealing with men who identify as women playing in girls' athletics and what it was like in front of the Supreme Court. They argued this point for 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours. Unbelievable. Anyway, that's coming up. We'll get to it when we get back. But right now, here's the news from Salem. All right, back with you here on the Dave Elswick Show. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard from a couple of different states that were being sued because they had passed laws that said that men or boys who were identifying as women could not play women's sports in high school and things of that nature. And I played a couple of cuts in the first hour about this. What I want Tom to do is that he got about 4 cuts of the arguments that went down during that 3.5 hours. So we've cut down 3.5 hours to about 10 minutes with all of these cuts. And I want you to listen to what they're arguing about. It's crazy. It really is. I think we start off with the person who's identified as the guy who's appearing before the Supreme Court for Idaho, and what he's talking about. All of this argument was about. So let's listen in.
Can I question the premise that you are putting forward? Even if I agree with you that equal protection is this classification justified? I think that begs the question, what is the classification? And so to the extent that you have an individual who says what is happening in this law is that it is treating someone who is transgender but who does not have, because of the medical interventions and the things that have been done, who does not have the same threat to physical competition and safety and all of the reasons that the state puts forward, that's actually a different class, says this individual. So you're not treating the class the same, and you're not how do you respond to that? In other words, the as-applied challenge essentially redefines the class, or one could think of it as that. And so what's wrong with that, number one, and how do you square that with our holdings in Caban, which Lair later described in this way? In other words, Lair suggested that Caban was establishing that as-applied challenges of this nature do exist.
Certainly, take the second question first.
Yes.
Caban says nothing about as-applied. I know that Lair says later this was an as-applied case, but simply reading Caban, it does not say that. It simply applies intermediate.
No, I understand, but those two cases were in juxtaposition with one another,
yes.
And Lair comes out the way it does, distinguishing Caban on the basis that it's an as-applied challenge, and we in Lair have a facial challenge, and it's basically the same facts. So if you're right, that those two cases can't come out the way they do.
I don't think so, Your Honor. Again, Lair was actually briefed as a standing argument of maybe you might be able to argue that this law is overbroad, but you individually are not in the overbroad part, and therefore you don't get to challenge it. The Court didn't use standing language, like express standing language in the opinion, but that is the logic of the opinion.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
There's another way to think about the case your friends on the other side posit, and that is that transgender status should be conceived of as a discrete and insular class subject to scrutiny, heightened scrutiny in and of itself, given the history of de jure discrimination against transgender individuals in this country over history, in immigration and family law, cross-dressing statutes. They give a long laundry list, and I'd like you to respond to that.
Well, this is the highest court in the land, all right? And it's just crazy what they're arguing about. It is. You got some of the most brilliant people, jurisprudence people, and they're arguing about what's a man and what's a woman. That's just bizarre. This whole thing was bizarre. What else you got, Tommy? What other ones did you get for us?
I got another part where he answers the question. I've also got another part that I like is where they ask, so basically if there's a guy that's not good at a certain sport, can he go ahead and identify as a female and play on their sport?
Okay, let's hear that one.
Individual male who is not a good athlete, say a lousy tennis player, and does not make the women's and wants to try out for the women's tennis team. And he said, there is no way I'm better than the women's tennis players. How is that different from what you're being required to do here?
It's not all different, Your Honor, and that's exactly what we're concerned about, that their arguments about needing to make exceptions from an otherwise valid classification for people for whom that classification doesn't make sense, those arguments don't limit themselves to people who identify as transgender. Many males could say, I can't really compete with the women's basketball team, and therefore I should be able to try out. And I haven't seen an answer from the other side as to why they couldn't. Beyond, I correct myself. They say that, well, those people don't face the same dignitary harm as transgender people. But I don't see how that's relevant to the intermediate scrutiny analysis. The analysis is this classification substantially related to a legitimate state interest? The person's reasons for wanting to violate the classification don't come into the analysis.
Wow. I mean, it's a good question. Maybe you don't identify a woman. Maybe you're just a really crappy tennis player, and you're not going to be able to beat the women either. So, but you'll have a better chance of beating them than you would of beating the guys. So you want to be able to play against the women. This is insanity of what they're arguing about. It really is. It's insanity. Okay, now we have two more. What else you got?
So I have the second part to the one where they're asking about the classification.
Okay, let's hear it.
Law, cross-dressing statutes. They give a long laundry list, and I'd like you to respond to that.
Certainly. On the jury discrimination point specifically, there has been some discrimination against transgender people, significant discrimination against transgender people in the history of this country. The same can be said of many groups. The same could have been said of the mentally disabled in Cleburne, et cetera, et cetera. I think Justice Alito's concurrence in Skrmetti is helpful with this in saying this quasi-suspect class or suspect class process, what we're really looking for is classes that look like race or like sex. And if you compare the discrimination in this case, where not one of the laws they cite actually classifies expressly on the basis of transgender status, if we look at that history and we compare it to the history of African Americans and women who were not able to vote, who were not able to own property, who had express classifications based on their status written into the law for most of this country's history, these things don't compare. They're just not alike.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't make sense to me that the Supreme Court of the United States is spending this kind of time to talk about these types of questions. Seriously. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, we have one more, and I think that was the Idaho guy talking about what the whole thing dealing with Idaho was going to be about, right?
Yeah, I think it was like the closing statement or so.
Okay, well, let's hear that, and then we'll call it quits.
Mr. Chief Justice, a few points. I heard just a moment ago that there is no real threat to women's sports. We strenuously disagree. We cite Your Honors to the UN Special Rapporteur's report that says 600 women have lost 890 medals in 29 different sports. That's what we're talking about. It is a real threat. Medical transition does not reliably suppress all male athletic advantages. I'd cite Your Honors to our record, in which our expert, Dr. Brown, shows the experience of one C.C. Telfer, an elite track athlete who underwent a medical transition and whose track times did not change. That is the story in many situations, and unless we can reliably distinguish between those situations and the situations which testosterone suppression does reliably eliminate the advantage, then we can't do that. We need a broader classification, and sex is the right one. And if it were merely politically motivated, I would add we wouldn't see this same rule being implemented by World Athletics, World Boxing, the NAIA, these different groups that were not influenced by recent politics but came to these decisions after studies, after lengthy examination, and reached the same decision that Idaho has. Justice Gorsuch, in your colloquy with Respondents' Counsel, she agreed with us that this is not the same as the discrimination that has been faced on the basis of race or on the basis of sex in this country. We agree it's not close to the discrimination that people have faced on the basis of race or sex in this country. That said, the Court does not need to reach that answer here, because if there is no transgender status classification in Scrimeti, there certainly cannot be one in this case. In fact, as our briefs argue, the Court can and should avoid all of these questions by applying rational basis review. Bottom line, sports are assigned by sex because sex is what matters in sports. It is the fairest and the safest and the most administrable way to assign sports teams. It's been widely accepted for many decades because it's necessary for fair competition, because where sports are concerned, men and women are obviously not the same. If Idaho can't enforce a sex-based line here in sports where nobody disputes that biological differences matter, then no line based on biological sex can survive constitutional scrutiny. The Court should uphold the Fairness in Women's Sports Act and reverse.
Thank you, counsel.
Okay, so that wraps it up, but that gives you an idea. I'm glad that I wasn't a reporter and had to sit through all that crazy stuff. I mean, Brown has to be the worst. I mean, I don't think that we had much from her because her stuff was just like, she doesn't even know what a woman is. So how can she make any kind of legal, decision on this? I mean, she can't. If you can't define what a woman is, then there's no way you can have any input on this. None. Zip. Nada. So I read an post last night from the writer of the Harry Potter books, and she was having a field day with it. Just literally having a field day about them not having a definition for sex. She says, how can you go before the number one court in your country and not even be able to define for them what it is that you're arguing about? And I have to agree with that. And we have to find that word salad that Brown came up with from yesterday. And I want to hear her deliver it and try to make it sound like she's a brilliant person while she does it. Because people who talk like that, that's exactly what they do. They try to make it. They think the more words they say, whether they tie together or not, or use definitions of the words as they were supposed to be made, they give them different meanings. It supposedly makes them sound smarter than what they are. So anyway, that's what your money was going for yesterday at the Supreme Court. It's the Dave Elswick Show, 101.1, The Answer, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, about 8 minutes till 11 o'clock, so we're down to the last few ticks of the clock for the Wednesday show here. Plenty of people disagree with infant baptism, but it is a traditional practice of the Catholic Church. The former president of Ireland, Mary McAlsey, has claimed baptism denies babies their human rights. Now, when I saw that headline, I thought, what is she trying to say? What is she trying to prove? Her comments were highlighted in an article in the Irish Times with the headline, Mary McAlsey, Baptism Denies Babies Their Human Rights. This woman is nominally Catholic but doesn't agree with the teaching or practice of the Catholic Church. I believe she is a canon lawyer, but somehow she was radicalized. She also says this is the real issue we need to focus on, the great injustice in the world today. And in the Irish Times, they put forth this email. No one is Catholic by birth, and the notion of baptismal promises is risible, writes Mary McAlsey. Anyway, she basically is saying that I guess you don't have all the rights of the Catholic Church if you're baptized as a Catholic. I don't understand what she's trying to make out of this. It doesn't. The woman just barely makes it under the Calypso poll for being Catholic. Okay, just barely made it, but she doesn't agree with the teaching or practice of the Catholic Church. Says the writer, I believe she is a canon lawyer, but somehow she was radicalized. She says this is the real issue we need to focus on, the great injustice in the world today. And she's not a prelate, she's not a theologian, she's a politician. She says the real injustice, the real violation of human rights in our world is not immigration, not foreign policy, not the economy, not how we treat the poor. It's not even abortion, the wholesale slaughter of little babies. No, it's baptism. It's difficult to see how one arrives at that conclusion or that obsession without demonic influence. Now, I'm not someone who says there's a demon under every rock, but we live in a world where the material and immaterial are not totally separable. Nevertheless, I'm not demon hunting all the time. It's very difficult to understand how the former president of Ireland can say that the great human rights violation of our time is baptizing babies, because it is supposedly bad. One could try to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you could argue that infant baptism is technically a violation of human rights because after the fall, humans deserve death. Sin and death pervade the world, and in our fallen nature, what we deserve is death, and baptism saves us from death. Many people have different views of baptism, but you do see it in Scripture. Our Lord says, let the little children come to me. You see baptisms of children in the book of Acts multiple times. In 1 Peter 3:21, St. Peter essentially says baptism now saves you. There are many, but before that, acceptance of Christ is necessary. All right, I mean that's a take in that piece of Scripture. There are many theological discussions about what that means exactly, but baptism is what demarcates us as Christians. Plenty of people disagree with infant baptism, but it's the traditional practice of the Catholic Church. But setting those theological debates aside, the closest one could get to her argument is that baptism denies babies their human rights insofar as it saves them from the consequences of the fall of man. And that's a good thing. Isn't that a good thing? My last point, this woman who says baptism violates babies' human rights supports abortion. She supports legally murdering babies in the womb, but not baptizing them once they're born. The only way to reach that conclusion is either to follow the perversity of liberalism to its end or through demonic influence. I don't see any other explanation. And it really makes me raise an eyebrow at other left-wing politicians. I have to agree with that. That she says that baptism is one of the worst things that you can do for a child. Anyway, not saying it's the right thing to do, but I'll say this, it's not the worst thing. All right, time for me to get out of here. I'll be with you tomorrow. We'll start it off with Bumper to Bumper. We'll have David on talking about gold, silver, and the economy. And Matt Smith will be on with us tomorrow as well. All that and more right here on 101.1, of course, The Answer and the Dave Elswick Show.